The NFL season is officially concluded after the Philadelphia Eagles defeated the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 59. And on today's show, I want to talk about the latest surrounding the Dolphins after the Super Bowl and the latest rumors, because there is something that I think we could all take away from Super Bowl 59 as it relates to the Miami Dolphins, because the reason why the Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 59 is because they absolutely dominated the trenches. It was my top takeaway from the game. And when you talk about overall just being the best team in the AFC, because that's the goal for Miami, so they could be in the big game for the first time in a very long time, to be at the top of the AFC and beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you have to dominate the trenches. You have to have a surefire offensive line. You have to have a even better defensive line to get after some of these quarterbacks, not allow anything in the run game. And when you're playing quarterbacks like Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen consistently, you got to beef up that interior D-line as well as get the offensive line figured out, and we'll talk about why in just a second. But I do want to get the vibes flowing. We're officially in the offseason for all 32 NFL teams, and if you want this time next year Miami to be in the big game in Super Bowl 60, hit that thumbs up icon. There's no reason to jinx it. Come on, join us and help us out. All right, the reason why I want to talk about this is because you saw how badly Kansas City got dominated in the trenches yesterday by Philly. Well, if Miami were to hypothetically be in this game, they would likely get dominated as well, because this past year, the trenches were an absolute issue for the Dolphins. We always talk about the offensive line, and we know that they are not graded out highly from PFF and the pass blocking and the run blocking department, and you could just use the eye test as well. But because of the defense having a relatively good season, we didn't talk about how the defense really struggled to get after the quarterback this season. 27th in both sack percentage and sacks per game. And Chop Robinson helped overshadow this because he had a great rookie year, but the Dolphins need to get better at pressuring the quarterback. And like I mentioned with the Eagles, the blueprint is there to beat Patrick Mahomes, beat Kansas City, be at the top of the AFC. The Eagles last night generated 26 pressures, 6 sacks, and a 42.9% pressure rate while sending 0 blitzes. Vic Fangio had his defense rolling, which I know hurts us because he was our DC last year, left us for Philly. But they got home on Mahomes, sending 4 people consistently. They just relied on Josh Sweat, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, Nolan Smith, just in rotation, dominating that Chiefs offensive line, getting after Patrick Mahomes. And they were able to just consistently drop 7 people in the coverage, which allowed Mahomes to get absolutely nothing. The domination part of that Eagles defensive line is what Miami should try to recreate. But you also have to get the offensive line figured out, because on the other end, Philadelphia has the best offensive line in football from top to bottom. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, Lane Johnson. So yeah, their defensive line dominated, but they were also a top 3 rushing attack in football this year. Jalen Hurts threw the 1 interception because he was pressured, but for most of that game, he was very clean. He had all day to decipher what Kansas City was doing on the back end and drop home some dots. Like, the blueprint is there to be good. And the funny thing is that many people said Jalen Hurts would never be able to win a Super Bowl. He wasn't good enough as a passer. He didn't have the arm talent to be in the top level of quarterback play in the National Football League. Yeah, he's got the ability to run and be a threat in the red zone with his legs, but when you compare him and Tua, it's really not that different in terms of throwing the football. I would also say Tua is probably a better processor and more accurate with the football, but Jalen Hurts is just more of that physical specimen that can use his legs. But with people saying that Hurts couldn't win a Super Bowl, many have said the same thing about Tua. And although I do agree with that, if you were to build a team like the Philadelphia Eagles in Miami that is so dominant on both the offensive line and defensive line, and then you mix in the RPO game, the accuracy and touch that Tua displays, yeah, I think he could help deliver a Super Bowl if him and Hurts swap places. Like, I think Tua could win a Super Bowl in Philly, if I'm going to be completely honest, having that same type of structure around him, which is why Miami needs to try to recreate that structure as long as Tua is your QB1. And let me know your thoughts. Can the Dolphins win a Super Bowl with Tua? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I know a lot of people have been no in the past, but if you were able to get somewhat close to what Philly has done, we've seen San Francisco do the same thing with Brock Purdy. I think it's possible. Let me know your thoughts down below. And we've talked about if they do that, the blueprint is there. Well, now I want to talk about how the Dolphins actually build the trenches, because it's something they have to seriously invest in this offseason, both financially in free agency as well as in draft assets during late April. And we've talked ad nauseum so far this offseason about the offensive line, and that is going to continue because your left guard and right guard spots need to be filled. Your right tackle and center are solidified, Austin Jackson and Aaron Brewer. The left tackle spot is a little bit of a question mark. You don't know if Teron Armstead is going to retire or return. If he does, he has to play at a lower rate in terms of his contract, or he could be traded. But you have Patrick Paul waiting in the wings to be the starter as well. So you do need to figure out that interior offensive line at left guard and right guard. And here are the top 10 free agents in my mind in terms of the Dolphins potentially going after. Trey Smith is the top guy, but I don't think the Dolphins ultimately go after him because I think he's going to get $20+ million in free agency from the Kansas City Chiefs or someone even better. So it's interesting to see that. Will Fries is someone we've talked about quite a bit. Tevin Jenkins, Kevin Zeitler, James Daniels. We'll talk a lot about them here coming up in just a second. But I truly do believe you have to sign two of them. You have to sign two. I don't know. Like, I think free agency is the part where you address the offensive line, and then you could maybe do some in the draft as well as get some young guys in there. But signing two veteran free agents to just plug and play in your interior offensive line, to me, is the best way to go about it. We will talk about which two I want to target in just a second, but we are sponsored by Mando. My favorite whole body deodorant, has me smelling right on a consistent basis. And Mando's whole body deodorant gives me confidence when I leave the house, and especially when I'm going on dates this time of year, because we know what February is all about. Mando is safe to use anywhere on your body, created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. Clinically proven to block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, plus free shipping. And I got a couple products in studio today with me that I really enjoy. I got the normal stick deodorant with my favorite scent, Mount Fuji. And I got the deodorant wipes, which is perfect for on the go. For example, I'm going on a trip this upcoming weekend. Yeah, my deodorant wipes will be packed so I can smell fresh on the go. It's something that I always travel with me, not only on trips, but also when I'm just running errands around on the weekends and weekdays. And then as a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code CHAT. That equates to 40% off your starter pack when you use code CHAT at shopmando.com, shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. We're going to continue to talk about Will Fries as the top free agent target, in my opinion, for the Miami Dolphins. I want him. The Indianapolis Colts is someone, or the free agent from Indy is someone that I've targeted and I think would be a great addition to the Miami Dolphins, but also James Daniels, someone I'm starting to become more and more of a fan of. And yeah, Will Fries got injured last season, only played about 268 snaps, but when he was on the football field, he was absolutely terrific for Indianapolis, putting up gaudy PFF numbers. And because of that injury that he suffered, I think you're going to get him at a little bit more of a discount than what you would have if he played the full season and balled out. Like a 4-year, $14 million on annual average salary contract, to me, works out for Fries, someone who could really be a long-term investment for Miami on the interior offensive line. But then you could also pair that up with James Daniels, who also is coming off of pretty severe injuries, an Achilles injury, which is a tough one for an offensive lineman to come back from, but that will allow you to get him on a one-year prove-it deal, almost like Mekhi Becton in Philly this past year. Becton playing on a one-year deal, super cheap. You can get James Daniels on a one-year, $5 million deal, and he was looking like having his best season as an NFL professional for Pittsburgh before he got hurt. You could take the gamble. And I know you're going to probably say, well, these two are coming off pretty catastrophic injuries. You're not going to have a complete, perfect offensive line. I understand that, but you got to have a little bit of risk here. And when you're the Miami Dolphins, who don't have a lot of cap space, they're actually the third worst cap space situation in the NFL right now. Now, that could change by releases, trades, restructures, and just overall other cap-cutting moves. But as you currently sit right now, you are negative $15 million cap space. So you got to go bargain shopping here at some points and try to get the best value. And coming off injuries, I think you're getting two players that are going to be ready for opening day and be plug-and-play starters, and you're going to get them at a discount and more value than what you would have because of those injuries. I think Will Fries and James Daniels are two targets I really like to potentially be your starting left guard, right guard combination in 2025. And make sure you are subscribed because we are a month away from NFL free agency, and when Dolphins news and rumors comes out about what they're doing with their roster and in free agency, we will have you covered with videos. About 700 subscribers away from 68K. Join us here at Dolphins Today right now. I think the Dolphins' path here in the offseason is figuring out interior offensive line in free agency because I think there are a lot of good interior offensive line free agents that you can get. Sure, would I like to draft one as well? Absolutely. I think if you did the Will Fries, James Daniels combination, you could still draft an interior offensive lineman in day 2 of the draft with that 98th overall selection projection from the comp pick or at the second round. And then you could also turn towards the NFL draft for defensive line because the defensive line is probably something we need to talk more about here in this offseason because there is only one player on the defensive line currently, and that's Zach Sealer. Now, he was your best defensive player last season, but you need to build more of a complete room around Zach Sealer this offseason, whether it's in the draft or free agency. Calais Campbell was great last year. I thought Benito Jones and Dashawn Hand filled in nicely. But getting a stud defensive lineman to pair up next to Sealer could prove massive dividends for this Dolphins defense in terms of getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, but also becoming one of the best defensive lines against the run in the NFL. I think drafting a D lineman in day 1 or potentially day 2 was something Chris Grier will seriously consider. I know we have to fill the safety room, the interior offensive line and defensive line room, but drafting a D lineman makes a lot of sense for me. And we're going to look at some targets in the NFL draft here in just a second. But should the Dolphins go D-line in round 1, type D for draft, type P for pass? Let me know if you think Miami should draft a defensive lineman in day 1 of the NFL draft. And as we turn our eyes towards some draft prospects, here are some to keep your eye on for. Now, I did kind of split these up into players that you could see go on round 1 into compared to day 2, whether it be that rounds 2 or 3. Now, Mason Graham is the top defensive lineman on the interior. He is an absolute stud from Michigan, and he is likely going to go inside the top 7 or 8. So unless the Dolphins trade up, I don't think Mason Graham is an option. But Walter Nolan, Kenneth Grant, and Tyleik Williams are 3 players that could go anywhere between, honestly, 13 at Miami to the end of the first round at 32. And then we've talked about TJ Sanders as an option for Miami on day 2 of the NFL draft in a mock draft video last week. But Deion Walker from Kentucky, he's an absolute massive human being, is someone I like. Derek Hardman from Oregon is someone that's rising up boards as well. And then Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee is also someone I'm keeping my eye on. But when you talk about first-round guys, Nolan, Grant, those 2 are interesting. But also, if you wanted to go on the edge department, because yeah, you might ultimately move on from Bradley Chubb to free up $19.5 million in cap space. And if you do that, you might want to draft someone to replace him to still have an elite edge trio. Now, the guys on the left are more likely to go in the first round. James Pierce Jr., Mike Green, Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker, Shamar Stewart. Not putting Abdul Carter on this list because he's going in the top 3 or 4 of the NFL draft, so Miami's not going to be able to get him. But then the guys on the right could be late first-round targets or early day 2 targets like Landon Jackson. I don't really know how to say his name fully. Donovan Izuraku from Boston College. He is rising up boards as well. These are some names to keep your eye on. Jalen Walker specifically, off-ball linebacker edge hybrid, could be a versatile piece to add to a defense out of Georgia. And if I'm going to be honest, looking at some of these prospects, I don't know, especially when we're talking about interior defensive linemen, that any of them are worth drafting at 13 right now. But I could absolutely see the Dolphins trading back from 13, maybe moving back to 18, 19, 20. If another team wants to move up and they identify a prospect they like, Miami could acquire some assets and then drafting a defensive lineman there. Like if the Dolphins traded back on draft night from 13 to 21, acquired future day 2 picks or day 2 picks in this NFL draft, and then ultimately went with like a Kenneth Grant or Mykel Williams from Ohio State, I would be very excited about that prospect because Kenneth Grant, someone similar to Christian Wilkins, very athletic, can stop the run. Kenneth Grant, someone I think Chris Grier will really, really like, and you could hear him get linked to Miami quite a bit in the draft process. The ultimate point of this video that I'm making, though, is you saw how the Eagles just dominated the Kansas City Chiefs from start to finish in that game. And I'm not going to say the Miami Dolphins can do that in 1 year, but Chris Grier has to stop neglecting the trenches. Get better on the interior defensive line. Get better on the interior offensive line because you will not compete at the highest level until you absolutely have an offensive line and defensive line that can compete with the teams of Philly, San Francisco, the Detroit Lions, the Baltimore Ravens. That's why I think the Bills have been held back, because their offensive line, which has been much better this past year, but their defensive line and run defense was not good this year. That's what Miami really needs to take away from this NFL postseason and the Super Bowl. All right, that will do it for today's video. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we are going to continue to bring you coverage on Miami on a daily basis. So make sure you hit that sub button, and when Dolphins news drops, we'll have you covered. So subscribe today.